The gunshot split the frozen silence so cleanly it felt as if the mountain itself had cracked open. Eliza Rowan flinched, the leather-bound ledger slipping in her numb fingers as snow drifted down from the charred rafters above her head. The sound echoed once, twice, then vanished into the pine-choked ravine outside the ruined way station. For a heartbeat, the world went utterly still. No wind, no birds. Only the rasp of her breath and the slow, terrifying understanding that someone had followed her into the high country. She closed the ledger and pressed it to her chest. The way station had been dead for 2 years. Ever since a winter fire took the roof and left the stone walls blackened and hollow like a skull. Eliza had told herself she was foolish to come here alone, foolish to return to a place that smelled of ash and old grief. But the ledger had led her back. It always did. Names, numbers, promises written in ink that refused to fade, promises that had ruined lives. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Stone chips leapt from the doorway. Eliza blew out the lantern and darkness rushed in, thick and suffocating. She moved by memory, fingers skimming along the wall until she found the narrow service door at the rear of the building. Her boots crunched softly on snow as she slipped outside into the ravine, the cold hitting her like a slap. "Don't stop," she whispered to herself, her voice shaking. "Don't stop." She ran. The ravine fell steeply, forcing her into a half-slide, half-run, snow pouring into her boots as branches tore at her coat. The ledger thumped against her ribs with each step. Somewhere above, men shouted, their voices sharp with impatience and certainty. They knew the terrain. They knew she was alone. Eliza reached the frozen creek and skidded onto the ice, arms windmilling. The surface groaned under her weight, a deep, hollow sound that made her heart seize. She staggered forward, praying it would hold, and reached the far bank just as a bullet cracked. The ice where she'd been standing, she didn't look back. The trees swallowed her. Dense and black, their trunks like pillars holding up a sky heavy with snow. Her lungs burned. Her skirts tangled around her knees. She tasted blood where she'd bitten her lip. 30 years of life had not prepared her for this kind of running. But grief had hardened her in ways she had never expected. A shape moved ahead. Eliza skidded to a halt, yanking the small derringer from her pocket. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice hoarse. The figure stepped into a pale wash of moonlight. He was tall, wrapped in a long, weathered coat, his dark hair bound low at his neck. Snow dusted his shoulders. He did not raise a weapon. He simply stood there, calm as the mountain itself. "If you keep running," he said quietly, "you will fall, and they will find you broken." Eliza's finger trembled on the trigger. "Who are you?" "A man who knows these woods," he replied. "And who heard the gunshots?" Behind her, a shout echoed too close. The man's eyes flicked past her, sharp and assessing. "You are being hunted," he said. "And you are not as hidden as you think." "I didn't ask for your help," Eliza snapped, though fear made her voice thin. "No," he agreed. "But you need it." Another shout. Boots crunching. The sound of men spreading out. The man moved suddenly, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides. He caught her wrist, not rough, not gentle, just firm enough to anchor her, and pulled her sideways into a narrow cleft between boulders. Pine roots knotted overhead, forming a natural blind. He crouched, drawing her down with him. "Breathe slower," he murmured. "They hear panic." Eliza's heart slammed against her ribs, but she forced herself to follow his rhythm. In, out. The ledger felt like a weight dragging her. Under. Lantern light bobbed past the opening, close enough that she could hear a man swear about the cold. Someone laughed, thin and cruel. "Keep moving," another voice said. "She can't have gone far." Eliza squeezed her eyes shut. She felt the man's shoulder against hers, solid and warm even through layers of wool. He smelled faintly of wood smoke and sage, a grounding scent that steadied her more than she wanted to admit. The voices drifted away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the man leaned back slightly. "They will circle," he said. "But not tonight. The snow is turning." Eliza opened her eyes. "You sound very sure." "I am," he said. "My name is Taya Allen." She hesitated, then lowered the derringer. "Eliza Rowan. Why are men trying to kill you, Eliza Rowan?" She swallowed. "Because I won't give them what they want." Taza's gaze dropped to the edge of the ledger peeking from her coat. "You carry a book." Her grip tightened. "It's mine." "I did not say otherwise," he replied. "But books make powerful enemies." A wind rose through the trees, carrying snow with it. Taya stood and offered his hand. After a beat, Eliza took it. He led her uphill along a narrow path that twisted through the timber, avoiding open ground. They moved quickly but quietly, as if the forest itself had taught him where to step. At the crest of the ridge, the trees opened into a high meadow washed in moonlight. The snow unbroken and luminous dot at the far edge stood a small cabin. Half buried, smoke curling from its chimney. "Who lives there?" Eliza asked. "My aunt," Taya said. "She does not like surprises. But she dislikes dead strangers more." Inside, warmth wrapped around Eliza like a memory. The cabin smelled of broth and drying herbs. A woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes as sharp as flint looked up from the stove. "You're late," she said to Taya. Then her gaze fixed on Eliza. "And you brought trouble." "Yes," Taya said, "but not ours." The woman studied Eliza for a long moment, then nodded once. "Sit, you're shaking." Eliza sat by the fire, hands wrapped around a chipped mug as heat seeped back into her bones. She watched Taya shrug off his coat, the firelight catching the lines of his face, calm, watchful, older than his years. "What is in the book?" The woman asked. Eliza hesitated, then placed the ledger on the table. "Rent," she said. "Paid, unpaid, changed after signatures were made. Names crossed out when people couldn't fight back." Taya opened it, flipping through the pages with growing intensity. "This is how they do it," he said. "They say yes first." His aunt snorted. "Yes is an expensive word." Taya closed the ledger. "Because you say yes, so you can't pay your rent," he said softly. "That is how they trap you." Eliza stared at him, startled by the accuracy. "My husband died believing the law would protect us," she said. Instead, it swallowed him. Outside, the wind held. Somewhere in the dark, men searched and cursed. Taya met her gaze. "You came back for this book knowing it could kill you." "Yes." "Then you are braver than you think," he said. Eliza looked down at the ledger, its worn leather scarred by fire and time. For the first time since the gunshot, since the chase, she felt something other than fear. She felt resolve, and she did not yet know that this night, this firelit cabin, this Apache man with steady eyes would change not only her fate, but the fate of an entire town waiting below the mountains. Dawn came thin and pale, like light strained through bone, and Eliza woke to the sound of wind combing the pines outside the cabin. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The fire had burned low, leaving the room washed in gray ashlight. Then memory returned all at once, the gunshots, the run through the ravine, the ledger pressed to her chest, and the Apache man who had stepped out of the trees as if the mountain itself had given him shape. She sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the room. Naya was already awake, kneeling near the hearth, coaxing flame from coals with practiced patience. Taya stood near the door, pulling on his boots, his movements quiet and economical. "You sleep like someone who expects to be chased even in dreams," Naya said without looking up. Eliza rubbed her face. Old habits. Taya glanced back at her. The storm turned in the night. Snow will hold tracks now. Her stomach tightened. So they'll follow. Yes, he said simply. Which means we leave. Eliza swung her feet to the floor. Cold bit through her stockings. Leave where? Naya rose, ladling broth into a cup and pressing it into Eliza's hands. Down, she said. To the river towns, where men pretend paper is stronger than winter. Eliza blew on the broth, steam fogging her face. I was already going there. Alone, Naya said. That would have been foolish. Taya met Eliza's eyes. You still want to go? Eliza didn't hesitate. Yes. They left before the sun fully cleared the ridge. The cabin vanished behind them like a secret swallowed by trees. Taya led, moving fast now, choosing paths that cut across slopes and dropped sharply toward the gorge. Eliza struggled to keep pace, breath tearing at her lungs, but she refused to ask him to slow. The ledger was tucked inside her coat, its weight steady, reassuring. By midday they reached the overlook where the land fell away into the river valley. Below them, smoke rose in thin columns, and the iron line of the railroad glinted like a scar through the trees. That's Larkspur Junction, Eliza said. Taya nodded. Where rent is counted more carefully than people. They descended as afternoon waned, skirting the outskirts rather than entering straight on. The town sounded different from the mountains, hammer strikes, shouted bargains, the hiss of steam. Eliza felt exposed, every step closer tightening something in her chest. At the edge of town, Naya stopped. I won't go further, she said. My place is not among their doors. Eliza reached for her hand. Thank you. For everything. Naya squeezed her fingers, eyes sharp and warm. Do not waste what you carry, she said, glancing at the ledger. Then she turned to Taya. Watch your yes. He smiled faintly. I always do. They parted there, Naya melting back into the trees as if she'd never existed. Eliza and Taya continued on, boots hitting packed dirt now, the smell of coal and wet wood filling the air. Larkspur Junction rose around them in brick and timber, new and old colliding without grace. Men paused to stare at Taya, their gazes lingering too long, measuring. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks but lifted her chin and walked on. The rail office stood near the tracks, windows gleaming. Eliza stopped short. I need to go there, she said. That's where the rents are registered. Taya studied the building, then the men lounging nearby. They will recognize you. They already do, she replied. Inside, the office smelled of ink and oil. A clerk looked up, surprise flickering across his face before smoothing into something colder. Mrs. Rowan, he said. You're late. Eliza set her hands flat on the counter. I'm here. His gaze shifted to Taya. This is a private matter. It concerns land, Taya said calmly. That is never private. The clerk's mouth tightened. You'll need to wait. They waited. Time stretched. Finally, a door opened and a man emerged well-dressed, eyes sharp, confidence worn like armor. Eliza recognized him instantly. You should have stayed in the mountains, he said mildly. You burned the way station, Eliza replied. And you altered my husband's rent. The man smiled thinly. Accusations require proof. Eliza pulled out the ledger. The room still. Taya stepped closer to the desk. You say yes, he said, voice even. You let people believe they can stay. Then you raise the cost until they fall. Because you say yes so you can't pay your rent. A murmur rippled from the waiting area. The man's smile vanished. This is nonsense, is it? Eliza opened the ledger, her finger landing on a familiar page. This is my husband's name. This is his signature. And this, she tapped the altered figure, is written in different ink. The man's eyes flicked to the door. Guards. What followed was chaos. A chair scraped. Someone shouted. Taya moved instantly, placing himself between Eliza and the advancing men. He didn't raise his hands this time. He didn't need to. They backed out into the street, the crowd swelling, curiosity turning sharp. Eliza felt the weight of eyes, of judgment and hope tangled together. "We can't stay here," she hissed. "No," Taya agreed. "But they've seen the book now." They slipped away toward the river, ducking through alleys that smelled of fish and wet rope. The sound of pursuit followed, boots pounding, voices barking orders. The old mill loomed ahead, its wheel frozen solid, beams groaning in the wind. They burst inside, breathless, shadows dancing as lanterns flared. Others were already there, men and women Eliza recognized, faces lined with the same quiet desperation she carried. A washerwoman clutched her shawl. A rail worker held his cap like a shield. "Eliza?" Someone whispered. "Is it true?" She nodded, heart hammering. "I have proof." She climbed onto a crate, ledger in hand. Her voice shook at first, then steadied as she read. Names, dates, lies. The room filled with a low, rising sound, not quite anger, not quite hope, but something fierce and alive. Outside, the ice groaned. The door burst open. The well-dressed man stood there, face red with fury. "You're finished," he snarled. Before anyone could move, a shot rang out. Wood splintered. The ice beneath the mill cracked with a sound like the world breaking. Water surged up, black and violent. People screamed. Taya grabbed Eliza, hauling her toward the ladder as the floor buckled beneath them. The ledger slipped from her grasp. Skidding across the planks, she reached for it, panic surging. Then Taya dove, snatching it up just as the boards collapsed into the river. They climbed. Hands numb, hearts racing, emerging into night air filled with spray and chaos. Below, the river swallowed the mill piece by piece, carrying secrets away. Eliza clutched the ledger, soaked but intact. She looked at Taya, water streaming from his hair, eyes fierce and alive. "What now?" she asked. He glanced back at the town, lanterns flickering uncertainly. "Now," he said, "they can no longer pretend they didn't know." And as the river roared beneath them, Eliza understood that there was no turning back, not for her, not for Larkspur Junction, and not for the promise she had carried down from the mountains. The river did not calm after the mill collapsed. It roared through the night as if anger itself had found a voice, and Eliza lay awake in the loft above the carpenter's shop listening to it speak. Her clothes were still damp, despite the fire. Below, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ledger sliding across the floor, saw the boards give way beneath Taya's feet. She pressed her palm to her chest and breathed until the shaking east. Morning arrived wrapped in fog. The town smelled of wet wood and iron. Bells rang not in alarm, but in gathering. Word had spread faster than Eliza expected. By the time she climbed down the ladder from the loft, people were already standing in the street, murmuring, glancing toward the river. Taya waited outside, leaning against the wall, his coat drying in the weak sun. He straightened when he saw her. "You should eat," he said. "I will later." She looked past him at the crowd. "They're not afraid anymore." "No," he agreed. "That frightens the men who profit from fear." They walked toward the courthouse together. It sat on higher ground, brick walls darkened by years of coal smoke, a building meant to look permanent in a place where nothing truly was. Eliza felt the ledger's weight under her arm, heavier than ever. As they climbed the steps, a voice called her name, "Eliza." She turned. Naya stood at the edge of the crowd, wrapped in a dark shawl, her presence both unexpected and grounding. "I thought you wouldn't come down." Eliza said. Naya's mouth curved slightly. The river speaks loudly. Even old women hear it. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with bodies and anticipation. The judge sat high on the bench, his expression tired but alert. He glanced at Eliza, then at Taya, then at Naya, as if measuring how much trouble they represented. Proceed, he said. Eliza stepped forward. Her knees wanted to shake, but she locked them in place. This ledger contains altered rent agreements, she began. Names crossed out after payments were made. Figures changed without consent. These are not mistakes. They are patterns. A murmur swept the room. She opened the ledger and read, her voice gaining strength with each name. People stood as she spoke, faces tightening, hands clenching. A man near the back shouted, "That's my farm." A woman began to cry softly. The judge raised a hand. Order. Eliza kept reading. When she finished, silence fell heavy and absolute. The judge leaned forward, rubbing his temples. "Where is Mr. Price?" he asked. No one answered. Taya spoke then. "The mill took him," he said simply. Along with the lies he tried to drown. The judge closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had shifted. "This court will investigate," he said, immediately. Outside, the crowd spilled into the street, voices rising, relief and anger mixing like oil and water. Eliza stepped down from the courthouse steps and felt hands touch her shoulders, gentle, grateful. That afternoon, a notice was posted. Rents frozen. Properties seized pending review. The rail office locked. Eliza stood staring at the paper until the words blurred. "You did this," she whispered. Taya shook his head. "You carried it. Others were ready." The days that followed moved strangely, too fast and too slow at once. People came to Eliza with stories, with names she hadn't known to look for. The ledger grew thicker with added pages, testimonies written in careful hands. At night, Eliza and Taya walked by the river. The moon laid a silver road across the water, broken by current and shadow. "You could leave now," Eliza said one evening. "You've done what you came to do." Taya stopped, looking at her. "And you?" She thought of the way station, of fire and ash. "I don't know how to leave anymore." He nodded. "Then I stay a little longer." A week later, Price's office was opened under guard. Papers spilled out like entrails, proof upon proof. The town held its breath. On the 8th day, Price was found downstream, tangled in branches, his fine coat torn and waterlogged. The river had kept its claim. No one mourned. The judge's ruling came at dusk. Restitution ordered. Land returned. Debts erased where fraud was proven. The ledger entered into record. When the crowd dispersed, Eliza found herself alone with Taya and Naya by the riverbank. "You have finished one story," Naya said. "Do not rush to begin another." Eliza looked at the water, then at Taya. "What do you do when the fight is over?" Taya smiled faintly. "We decide what we pay next. Rent is not always money." Naya nodded approvingly. "And yes is still expensive." They stood together. As the sun sank, the river carrying the past away, leaving the future uncertain, honest, and finally within reach. Spring did not arrive gently. It came loud and fast, breaking the river ice in grinding sheets and sending muddy waters slamming against the banks. Eliza stood on the edge of Larkspur Junction at dawn, watching the floodplain awaken. And for the first time since her husband's death, she did not feel like the ground beneath her might vanish without warning. The ledger lay closed on the small table behind her. Official now. Finished. That knowledge felt strange, almost frightening. For months, years, really her life had been defined by what that book demanded of her. Carry me. Protect me. Do not let them take me. Now it asked nothing at all. Behind her, the door creaked. Taya stepped outside, his coat slung over one shoulder, hair loose down his back. He followed her gaze to the river. "It always looks strongest when it's done destroying," he said. Eliza smiled faintly. "That makes me feel better than it should." They stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, listening to the water. The town behind them stirred, hammers ringing, wagons creaking, life resuming its stubborn rhythm. "You're leaving," she said, not as a question. Taya nodded. "The snowmelt opens the northern passes. My people will be moving." Her chest tightened, though she'd known this moment would come. "For how long?" He considered. "Long enough that the mountains forget my footprints." She laughed softly, then turned to face him. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," he said. "You didn't look away." They walked back inside. Naya sat at the table, mending a tear in her shawl, her hand steady, precise. "So," she said without looking up, "the town's still standing?" "For now," Eliza replied. Naya snorted. "It will wobble." Towns always do when they learn they were built crooked. Eliza poured coffee and set a cup beside her. "You stayed longer than you planned." Naya's eyes flicked up, sharp and amused. Curiosity is a powerful leash. Later that morning, the judge came to see Eliza not in his official robes, but in a worn coat that made him look smaller, more human. "We'll need someone to manage the restitution records," he said carefully. "Someone who understands how the lies were written." Eliza felt the old weight stir, then settle. "I'll do it," she said. "On one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "No closed doors," she said. "Everything stays visible." He nodded. "Agreed." When he left, Eliza exhaled slowly. Taya watched her. "You are choosing another burden," he said. "Yes," she replied. "But this one doesn't belong to anyone else." By midday, word of Taya's departure had spread. People came with awkward gratitude, apples, bread, a repaired coat. He accepted each gift with quiet grace, as if it were simply how the world was meant to work. At the edge of town, where the dirt road narrowed into trail, they stopped. Naya adjusted her shawl, eyes flicking between them. "Do not make promises that require lies to survive," she said. Eliza met her gaze. "I won't." Taya stepped closer to Eliza. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he reached into his coat and pressed something into her palm, a small carved piece of wood, smooth from handling. "For remembering," he said. Her fingers curled around it. "For coming back," she replied. He smiled, then turned and walked away, his figure shrinking against the green rise of the hills until he was just another shadow among trees. The weeks that followed were quieter, but not easy. Eliza spent her days in the courthouse, ink staining her fingers as she rewrote the town's story line by line. Some people thanked her. Others resented her. Change, she learned, always collected enemies. At night, she walked by the river alone. Sometimes she spoke to it, telling it things she hadn't said aloud since her husband died. Sometimes she simply listened. One evening, as the sun bled into the water, she saw a familiar figure on the bank. "Naya. Double quotes, you move like someone expecting the ground to argue with you," Eliza said. Naya smiled. "It usually does." They sat together, skirts brushing the damp earth. "You stayed," Eliza said. "For a time," Naya replied. "Someone must watch how a promise ages." Eliza looked at the river. "Do you think it will last?" Naya considered. "Longer than silence would have." Summer came, thick and green. Crops returned to fields once abandoned. The mill was rebuilt upriver, safer, slower. Rent agreements were posted publicly. Names were no longer whispered. One afternoon, a letter arrived on the northbound train. Eliza recognized the handwriting immediately. He wrote simply. The passes were clear. The hunting was good. The mountain still remembered her name. She folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the ledger. Not inside it. Autumn followed, gold and red spilling across the hills. Eliza stood again at the edge of town, the river lower now, calmer. Naya joined her, leaning on a staff she didn't need. "You did not leave," Naya said. "No," Eliza replied. "I learned I don't have to." A rider appeared on the road, dust rising behind him. Eliza's breath caught before her mind could stop it. Taya reined in near the bank, smiling as if he'd never left. "I said I'd return," he said. Eliza laughed, the sound surprising them both. "You said maybe." "Yes," he agreed. "But maybe is just yes waiting for proof." The river flowed on, carrying nothing unfinished, now only water and light, and the quiet knowledge that some debts, once paid, leave you richer than before.